I'd been at Triple Ridge Logistics for over 16 years, long enough to watch the company swallow itself in budget cuts, CEO changes, and a literal electrical fire that left half the building smoking. But I was the one who kept it all running. No one ever said thank you, but that was fine. I wasn't here for applause, just to keep the lights on. Then Trent showed up, fresh off an overpriced MBA, VP's son, and our shiny new head of digital transformation. He was the kind of guy who wore suits to meetings, but didn't know where the mainframe lived. His first week, Slack. Week 2, Trello. By week 3, he'd renamed our department to Cloud Architecture Advancement Division. I didn't even blink. HR told me I'd be supporting his transition, which meant babysitting his clueless ass while he tried to make us sound like a tech startup. I didn't argue, just kept a notebook. Names, systems, access logs, policy changes, no title necessary. I had something better, root access. A few days later, the cuts hit hard. The email came through like it always did. A clean, impersonal memo from HR. Departmental realignment. I stared at the screen, not surprised. My travel budget was gone. The equipment request I'd put in for some new servers was flat out denied, and they'd paused license renewals. Hell, they even flagged replacement drives as non-essential. They couldn't even keep the machines running, but they wanted to pretend like everything was fine. Trent started calling me legacy talent in meetings, like it was some kind of joke. I didn't flinch. I had seen cockier guys crash harder than he ever would. So I stayed quiet, let him play CIO without ever knowing what a backbone was. Then came the kicker. We were on an all-hands Zoom, some company-wide thing they did every month to pretend like they cared about transparency. I didn't give him the satisfaction of seeing me react. The silence hung for a second, thick enough to choke on. Then he carried on, pretending it hadn't just been a knife in the back. But I didn't need to say anything. I just leaned back in my chair, turned my webcam toward the secure server room door behind me, and then turned it back to face the screen. No explanation. No label, just that door. The thing is, I knew one person would notice. Cynthia O'Hare, the company's legal counsel, looked right at the screen and scribbled something down. Her pen didn't pause. She knew. Maybe she didn't know what it meant exactly, but she saw what I was doing. She saw that the one thing Trent didn't control was locked behind that door, and she knew exactly who held the keys. I didn't have to remind her. It was already in the memo. My access was consolidated to me. His cuts had made sure of that. Trent was running the company's digital transformation from his shiny little office, but I was the one who could still stop it all with a few keystrokes. The rest of the call was noise. People kept asking questions, pretending like they cared. Trent just kept pushing his agenda, babbling about cloud platforms and agile processes, none of which he understood beyond a buzzword. But Cynthia, she was paying attention. And the truth? I wasn't going to fix his mistakes anymore. Trent wanted full back-end access. Came to me one afternoon like he was asking for extra ketchup at lunch. Just hook me up with admin on everything, he said, like it was the most normal thing in the world. I stared at him for a second. You need level 5 badge auth for that, I told him. I didn't need to explain it. It was in the policy memo he'd signed back in March, the one that consolidated all the high-level credentials to me. For security reasons, of course. To reduce credential bloat. Trent didn't seem to care about the policy. He just laughed. Legal will override it. I didn't say anything back. Not a word. Instead, I just turned and walked past the steel server door, the one he'd locked himself out of when he'd restructured everything to fit his new little world. The door that only opened for me. I didn't have to be anywhere near him to know what was going to happen. He'd keep pushing firmware without backups, breaking API chains, ignoring vendor emails, ghosting infrastructure support like it was a game. Every mistake piled on top of the last. Bigger and messier. But I didn't correct him anymore. I didn't rescue him from his own chaos. I just documented it. The notebook, the one I kept at my desk, always open, always ready, was starting to look like a slow-burning fuse. Names, dates, errors, every policy change, every overlooked detail, every screw-up. Each page was a little more weighty than the last. I'd stopped pretending like I was helping him. I wasn't his backup anymore. I wasn't anyone's backup. He was sinking, but I wasn't throwing him a life raft. I wasn't going to keep saving him from himself. I wasn't going to fix his messes, no complaints, no rescues, just a quiet little record of everything he'd done wrong, everything I'd seen him ignore, break, or refuse to deal with. That notebook was a quiet, careful catalog of the inevitable. And as the days passed, I started to wonder if it was less about me keeping the lights on and more about him keeping the illusion of control. It was always going to be my name in the memo, if it hit the fan, my signature at the end of every policy, my login holding everything together. But he was too wrapped up in playing the role of a tech leader to realize what he was destroying, or that I was already the one who had the keys to everything. I just had to wait. One Friday, a vendor looped me into a failed certificate handshake. Simple stuff. A server couldn't authenticate, and the whole thing was tied to our inventory system. I checked the logs. Sure enough, Trent had missed a certificate refresh. A big one. I pulled up the credential records, and there it was. My manual credential, the one he'd never revoked, was still listed as primary. That meant my access was still running the show. But Trent? He didn't even bother responding to the vendor, just left it hanging for days. Normally, I'd have jumped in, fixed the issue, run the patch after hours, and gone home like a good little worker. But not this time. I didn't push it. I didn't bother to chase him down. I just added it to the archive. Another note in the growing pile of things he'd ignored. This wasn't about saving the company anymore. This was about letting things take their course, letting them see how much of a mess it really was. Sales started noticing the slowness. Systems were lagging. They couldn't close deals as fast. Procurement flagged duplicates, which I'd known were coming. Inventory wasn't syncing right. All the little things I'd been covering for him, they were starting to fall apart. And me? I just sipped my tea and updated the Incidents Ignored tab in my notebook. It felt almost too easy. The thing was, no one outside of me really saw the problem yet. Trent was too wrapped up in his shiny digital transformation to care about the details. He'd gone so far off the rails, trying to play tech CEO, that the real work, the stuff that kept the whole system running, was getting buried under his incompetence. But the cracks were widening, and soon enough, even he wouldn't be able to pretend it was fine anymore. I didn't need to be the one to break the news. The logs would do that for me. Early Thursday, a sync failed. The kind of thing that happens when your systems are patched with duct tape instead of solid code. Trent stormed into my office frantic. I could tell he was already halfway into panic mode. He didn't even knock. "Ben, pull backups. Resync now," he barked, already pacing in circles like a kid who lost his toy. I didn't even look up. "Backups are offline," I told him flatly. "Flagged non-essential last quarter." He froze, just for a second, like the idea hadn't even crossed his mind. Then he snapped, "Just re-enable it." His voice was too tight, too sure, like he could just force everything back into place by shouting louder. I leaned back in my chair, slid a piece of paper across the desk, and let him take it. It was a printed copy of his own policy memo, the one he'd signed back in March. "Consolidated access," it said, in bold, sterile font. No alternates, no exceptions. My signature nowhere on it. His, right there, like a neon "I'm in charge" stamp. He stared at the memo for a long second. I could see the gears grinding behind his eyes, but he didn't say anything. He just stood there, holding the paper like it might catch fire if he wasn't careful. I didn't need to say more. By lunchtime, we had a full-blown Tier 3 incident. Vendors were locked out. Finance got duplicate reports that didn't match up. Numbers were slipping through the cracks like sand through fingers. I could hear the emails buzzing in the background, each one more frantic than the last. Then the email from legal came. Cynthia from their team, asking the same question I knew was coming. "Why are you the sole key holder?" I didn't waste time explaining. I just replied with one attachment, the memo. No note, no explanation. No need for a back and forth. They could read it. They could see who signed it. The clock started ticking. The thing was, Trent still didn't get it. He kept trying to fix things, but he was out of his depth. He didn't know the back end like I did, and he wasn't going to. Not unless someone held his hand through every step. But I wasn't that guy anymore. I was done with rescuing him. So I sat back, opened my notebook, and made a new entry. Tier 3 incident, vendors locked out, finance errors, legal inquiry, incident ignored. Another line added to the growing list. The slow burn was happening, whether anyone realized it or not. Friday morning, another system tripped. The kind of thing that happens when you've ignored enough little problems and they finally add up to one big mess. Trent forwarded the vendor alert to me with a quick, "Handle this." Just a couple of words, like it was that simple. I didn't respond. Still on payroll, still doing my job. But I wasn't fixing his mistakes anymore. Not today. Legal started getting into the weeds. Real questions. The kind they didn't like to ask until things were already on fire. Compliance warnings stacked up like overdue bills. The emails started piling in, each one more insistent than the last. Trent tried to reset credentials himself, I guess thinking he could just bypass all the headaches. He got blocked by system auth. A nice little pop-up. Unauthorized, certificate mismatch. I could almost hear him swearing from my desk, but I wasn't about to lift a finger. He pushed harder, tried to override, but the vendors refused him. Ben Yates remains primary per compliance record. He couldn't get in, no matter how much he tried. I didn't need to do anything. I just sat there, letting it play out, watching it unfold, watching him hit walls, trying to push through, while the whole system buckled under his weight. My phone stayed silent. Not a single text, not a single call from Trent. Not that he was going to ask for help anyway. He'd burn that bridge the moment he thought he could handle it without me. By noon, I'd already made up my mind. I packed up my bag, grabbed my coat, and headed out the door. My first personal day in 2 years. I washed the truck, took my time, scrubbed the grill, wiped down the tires. The sun was low in the sky, and everything felt slower, knowing that Cynthia O'Hare slid the memo across the table, the one I'd made sure was sitting in my inbox earlier in the week. Ben Yates, Cynthia said, calm, precise. Sole credential steward. It was over. Everyone's eyes went to my empty chair, the one at the head of the table where I should have been, but I wasn't there. I was home, still on my PTO, still pretending like I didn't know what was happening back at the office. I hadn't answered a single email all morning. The calendar said PTO. I didn't owe anyone an explanation. Meanwhile, back at the office, the system started blinking out one by one. The patch queue failed. Financial sync threw errors. Clients and sales were calling, losing their minds, but the system couldn't keep up with the mess Trent had made. 2 major clients pulled out. One by one, the pieces started falling apart like dominoes. Trent called. I ignored it. HR emailed. I read it, but didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. At the office, they were starting to see the iceberg, the one I'd been warning them about for months. It wasn't just the lights flickering or the reports getting slower. It was everything. The foundation shaking under the weight of decisions they hadn't understood. And when they finally realized that the duct tape they'd thrown overboard had just been holding the whole damn thing together, it was too late. I let them stew. I let them fix it or burn, whichever came first. By Wednesday, it was red alert everywhere. Nothing moved, no updates, vendor certs rejected, pushes failed. Everyone was scrambling, trying to figure out what was wrong, but no one could get to the core of it. Systems were frozen in time, like the gears had all ground to a halt. The real chaos started when the founder came back from his silent retreat in Montana. He stepped into the office, took one look at the dashboard, and went pale. The sight of the numbers, the errors piling up, it hit him hard. "Where's Ben?" he asked, voice tight, like he already knew the answer. Legal didn't hesitate. They slid over memo 34B, the one with his son's signature on it. My name, plain and clear, and right underneath it, the one thing they hadn't noticed before, one field that kept repeating, sole credential steward. The founder looked at the memo, then back at the screens. "Fix it," he muttered, as if that would somehow change everything. Trent just sat there. He didn't speak, didn't move. His hands were folded, his face pale. He knew. It was the silence that gave it away. He knew he was in over his head, but at this point, the damage had already been done. I was still on PTO, still had my feet up. Cynthia from legal sent me an email, drafted an apology. She laid it on thick. "We understand now. Whatever you need." I didn't open it right away. Took my time. Sat on the porch, the sun warm on my face, the steady hum of the neighborhood around me. I watched a dog chase a ball across the street and thought about the mess they'd made of things. Finally, I picked up my phone. I read the email. Then I put it back down. I made some sweet tea, took a sip, and just let them stew. For the first time in years, it felt like I wasn't holding the weight of everything on my shoulders anymore. The company was burning, but I wasn't rushing in to save it. I'd done my part. I'd warned them. They hadn't listened. And now, it was their mess to clean up. The final war room meeting felt like a bad joke. No bagels, no smiles, just panic, a circle of sweating suits, and dashboards full of error lights blinking like sirens. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. They all knew it was too late to fix this. The systems were down, the vendors were locked out, clients were jumping ship, and the clock was ticking. Cynthia from legal started reading the policy aloud. Sole stewardship, one name, Ben Yates. Her voice was calm, but it cut through the chaos like a blade. The founder looked like someone had shot his dog. He stared at the screens, then back at the room, the realization finally hitting him. How the hell did we let this happen? Trent opened his mouth, but the founder cut him off before he could say a word. You muted the one guy who could fix it. There was a long silence. No one defended Trent. No one could. He just sat there, shoulders slumped, looking like a kid caught stealing from the cookie jar. Cynthia opened my reply. It was short, just one line. I'm not your assistant. That was it. The whole room deflated. You could almost hear the air leave their bodies, the energy draining out like a punctured tire. They had given all the power to the guy they treated like a backup generator, the one they thought could be replaced with a shiny new toy. And now they were stuck, locked out of their own castle, and I wasn't going to be the one to unlock the doors anymore. And me, I was home, fire pit going, dog asleep at my feet, wine in hand. I'd warned no one, threatened nobody. I just stopped helping.